What kind of fan feedback have you received about your current show, and are you enjoying this tour?
Well, the feedback that I get is what I read on the internet and what people tell me. It all seems to be going fine, and happily the reviews in the US have been almost unanimously kind and supportive and sometimes ecstatic. So what more can you ask?
Is this show the first time you've used video so extensively in a live performance?
No, we've been doing it for 4 years using video in the Thick as a Brick tours in 2012 and the Homoeroticus tours in 2014, and we've been using the video perhaps more extensively in the sense that it's telling a story. It's putting the songs into a narrative context, so it's done a little bit more in theatrical detail on this tour. It's not just visual effects and accompanying elements. It's actually, part of the storytelling backdrop to what essentially is a Best of Jethro Tull tour. But this time it's songs put in a certain order, with a certain choice as well to tell the story of the reimagined Jethro Tull in the present day.
What fuels your creative process more, writing and recording or performing live?
Well, they're joined at the hip, really. I think since I first started, as far as I can remember, the beginning of my attempts to perform music in public was probably at the age of 18. And at that time I'd just begun to try and write a couple of songs, so it was more or less contemporaneous as an early exploration into performance and writing music. But of course you can't write a full repertoire of music just from day one, so you have one or two pieces that you've written, and the rest of it is, or was back in 1966, whenever it was covers of R&B material, blues, R&B, some of the British bands of that era, like the Rolling Stones and the Animals and Manfred Mann, and those sort of people that we paid attention to as schoolboys, really.
Now, how involved are you in the various reissues of your music, and are you a fan of sharing early versions and outtakes of your past work?
Well, the music is, of course, something that is very much part of my life today, because a lot of that music from various different albums, going back right to the beginning, is still material that we play from time to time today. So it's not for me an exercise in tipping into my early history. It's really, in most cases, it seems quite contemporary, and working with Stephen Wilson, who's been doing the remixes of many of the early Jethro Tull albums, and is embarking yet again on the remixing and a few early pieces from the era of the stand-up album that's due for release at the end of this year. And of course I'm involved in it in the sense that I am in touch with Stephen, who will send me mixes from my input, and maybe we tweak something, change a little something here and there, but his process of working, which I well understand, is that he keeps the elements of the mix. He keeps the balances, the stereo picture very much as it was, and cleans up, tidies up, gives punch and clarity to all the different tracks, be they 8 or 16 or 24 or more in the case of recent work. But the job is one that it works to a plan, and hopefully I don't have to get too pernickety about detail, because Stephen does get it pretty much right. Sometimes I have questions to ask if there are certain elements that can't be changed because they are embedded in the same track or whatever. But these are compromises capture the best compromise for those media. These days, of course, you don't really worry about that because a contemporary CD or a downloaded good quality MP3 or a 24-bit WAV file. I mean, you don't need to worry about the things you had to worry about back then. But we had to make a lot of compromises in cutting vinyl. I think today we make less compromises cutting vinyl because the guys who do it, and there are very few of them around, are very enthusiastic, knowledgeable, usually younger people who have a huge respect and a huge discipline in regard to the cutting of vinyl, whereas I think back in the old days it was a little haphazard and perhaps not quite understood from a scientific and audio engineering point of view. So I think these days we get much better vinyl cuts than we did, 40 years ago.
Now, I know you've produced other artists in the past. Do you enjoy being a producer, and will you do that again in the future?
Absolutely not. No, I've never really liked working with, I do play on other people's records, but that's a very distant affair. I mean, I had a request today to play on, just to put some flute lines on a song by an Italian artist. And, all I will do is sit down later in the week and add my flute part to the reference MP3 that I was sent and send them the WAV file and a rough mix to show how I see it sitting in the track, and then they incorporate that into their master multi-track and do their mixes. So I don't actually have to go into a room with anybody because I'm a little antisocial. I don't really find it comfortable having to hang out with musicians or people. I like to be alone and just do my bit and send it to them, and if they like it, they use it. If they don't, they delete it. I don't charge them any money so they can do what they like, and that's the way I work. But if you're producing somebody, I mean, the relationship potentially is quite intense because you have to sometimes nursemaid your way through recording sessions when someone's feeling, musically insecure or emotionally insecure, and it can be a difficult job working with other musicians live in the studio. You've got to be sometimes a tough guy, sometimes show extraordinary sensitivity and diplomacy in the way in which you work with people, and it's quite wearying, it's quite demanding for a producer. So I don't really enjoy that process. I don't think I've only ever done it a couple of times, but I can't say I enjoyed the procedure of having to reach out to people on such a personal level as well as a musical one. Working with my own band's different. We know each other, and so there aren't the issues of getting to know somebody and having to pussyfoot around. But if you're working with another artist that you haven't worked with before, then it's a big learning curve to know how to work with them. And there's obviously, you're a little nervous with each other, and sometimes perhaps you don't actually really get on, but you have to get together and work. So production is not for me. No, I shall very confidently say that I won't be doing any more record producing.
Is there any of your records that were the most fun for you to record as far as the recording process?
Well, a lot of them are fun to record. I mean, even going back to your previous question about being a record producer, I mean, I remember being pleasantly surprised when I was producing a track for a band called Steel I Span back in the 70s, around 76 or something like that, and they asked me to get David Bowie to play saxophone on one of the songs, which I was able to do, and he came into the studio very well prepared, very professionally, totally on the case, did his bit in a couple of takes, and was it was a great pleasure to work with. A smiley, friendly, cheerful, and above all, professional and timely person. So sometimes doing those things can be quite rewarding. It's not all bad stuff, but it does depend on the personalities. I mean, I probably got David Bowie on a good day. He was fine and a perfect gentleman. So yeah, that's okay. But looking back on, I can remember lots of little memories that are like those, that are working with other people, whether live or on record. But usually something that I've made that have mostly been quite good fun. I can think of quite a few where we had enormous difficulties trying to, whereas a record producer working with Jethro Tull band members, sometimes, it was difficult, not from a personal point of view, just from a musical point of view. And that was sometimes difficult to overcome. And I've experienced that with several albums. And for example, recording the song Locomotive Breath on the Aqualung album was really quite tricky, and one that wasn't going well at all. But we kind of got there in the end in an unconventional way, but we did manage to do it. So there are sometimes challenges along the way where musically you don't all find it quite so possible to gel in the way that I, as the producer, would want. And sometimes you recognize that people have their way of playing something, and it would be a little heavy-handed to try and force them to doing it your way, and you've got to accept that you've got to modify the arrangement, modify your analysis and your approach to the whole song because of the input that others have to offer. It isn't always exactly what you want, but sometimes you have to say, well, that's all I'm going to get. I've got to make the best of it. And making the best of it means some compromises, but hopefully you end up with a slightly different but still a good realization of your original concept for a song.
And
so yeah, it's lots of good things, a few difficult things, but mostly I can look back on albums and think, well, that wasn't too bad.
now, my final question is, what's been the most satisfying part of your career so far?
The most what part? I mean, it's an ongoing thing. I don't really break it down so much into parts. I think there is, probably since the days of the internet. I mean, if we go back maybe to the end of the 1990s, then I think I enjoyed the whole procedure more because, first of all, the advent of internet websites for airlines and hotels and the information that we could draw from the internet made it much more of a speedy and quicker way of realizing the putting together of tours and concerts. You can do a lot sitting, from your office instead of having to send out a production manager halfway around the world to check out a building and see if it has, 220 volts or 110 volts or what kind of plugs they are and where are the flying points for the PA and all of the technical stuff. It's these days you can do most of it from home and from the office, and so I find that much easier because the more I can do in preparation and being able to, travel agents for me are the thing of the past, really. The only place I have a travel agent is for booking hotels in the USA, and that's because she is a big fan and loves to do it. But, frankly, by the time I've checked out the hotels and found them, as I do in other places, and I just get on and make the booking because it's what I do on Sundays. I'm a Sunday afternoon travel agent. That's usually when I do it. And then when my bank ring me up and say, why have you just spent, $20,000 in all these transactions on a Sunday, they stop my card because they think it's fraud. I keep trying to explain Sundays when I book the flights and the hotels, that's when all the credit card activity happens, and they get a little windy about it. But, it's what I do. I think that's much more fun and, in a sense, much less stressful when you come to do tours because everything's in place. I do the itineraries, and I was working on a German itinerary for November this afternoon, and it's a well-worn routine for me to do that. And in a way, it's kind of restful. It's sort of fun. It's a bit of a hobby, really. It's a parallel to the musical performance, but it's something that I don't resent having to do. Sometimes because it is so well understood. I mean, as you can imagine, itineraries are essentially templates. I just work from the same starting point every time and just fill all the information in. It's like doing tour budgets. It's most of them are relatively simple, and again, I'm just working to a template, putting in all the information that I have. American tour budgets are much more complex. They have to be sent down to the IRS about 3 months before a tour to get approval for the central quite detailed, and that takes me, a good few hours, 4 or 5 hours doing a US tour budget if I have all the information. Otherwise, I have to extrapolate it from previous tours and make educated guesses about what it will cost this year. And but then, I'm probably quite good at that. Giving it to somebody else who hasn't done it before, they wouldn't know where to begin.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Well, it's a pleasure. We look forward to, you're in where, Fort Wayne, is it?
Yes, I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to
well,
it.
there you go. And, we look forward to presenting the story of Jethro Tull, but Jethro Tull, the original historical character brought into the present day. And as I said, it's essentially, it's a best of Jethro Tull tour. So for the toe tappers who just want to hear a lot of the old favourite songs, then that should do the trick. And those who want to get a little bit more into the story and what it's about, then you can find all that. And if you go to jethrotull.com/synopsis, the synopsis is there, not only in the English language, but in many other languages as well, for those people who want to read what the story is and what the song listing is about and how it joins together. So, yeah, you can come in with a good idea of what it's going to